Just 24/7
ago,
TV.
with the help of many people in this room,
Former
we had
President
a
Donald Trump on
booming
Tuesday
electric
outlined a
government
hardline and harsh criminal justice agenda for the Republican Party,
strongest and most
praising
secure border
China's
in
justice
U.S.
system,
history,
pushing for the death
energy
penalty for drug
independence and
dealers,
even
and
energy
arguing the federal
dominance,
government should
historically low
circumvent
gas
governors to
prices
use the National Guard to fight crime.
no inflation, a fully rebuilt military, and a country that was highly respected all over the world by other leaders, by other countries, highly respected. Very simply, we had made America great again. We made it great again, and we did it by putting workers first, by putting families first, and above all, by putting America first. But now our country has been brought to its knees, literally brought to its knees, and who would have thought this could happen? Inflation is the highest in 49 years, 9.1%, and a lot of people think it's much higher than that. Gas prices have reached the highest in the history of our country. We have become a beggar nation, groveling to other countries for energy. Millions of illegal aliens are stampeding across our wide open borders, pouring into our country. It's an invasion. Democrat-run cities are setting all-time murder records. Our country is being dealt one historic humiliation after another on the world stage. And at home, our most basic rights and liberties are totally under siege. The American dream is being torn to shreds, and we will not have a country left if this economic, social, and attack on civilization itself is not quickly reversed. Newt Gingrich, friend of mine who's in our audience, told me this morning that our country has not been this weak in terms of prestige and relative economics and respect since the Civil War. And yet, there is time for us to bring America back from the brink. It's at the brink. Got to bring it back from the brink. We gather today on the verge of a historic midterm election. The American people are poised to reject the failed reign of Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and the radical left in a momentous landslide. This is an incredible opportunity. This November, the people are going to vote to stop the destruction of our country, and they're going to vote to rescue America's future. I'm here before you to begin to talk about what we must do to achieve that future when we win a triumphant victory in 2022 and when a Republican president takes back the White House in 2024, which I strongly believe will happen. There's a tremendous amount to be done, from reviving our economy to liberating our energy to restoring our standing in the world. But for this afternoon, I want to speak about some of the core elements of our agenda, and in particular, public safety, of which we have very little. There's no higher priority than cleaning up our streets, controlling our borders, stopping the drugs from pouring in, and quickly restoring law and order in America. Under the Democrat rule, in Democrat-run cities, Democrat-run states, and a Democrat-run federal government, the criminals have been given free rein more than ever before. There's never been a time like this. Our streets are riddled with needles and soaked with the blood of innocent victims. Many of our once great cities, from New York to Chicago to LA, where the middle class used to flock to live the American dream, are now war zones, literal war zones. Every day there are stabbings, rapes, murders, and violent assaults of every kind imaginable. Bloody turf wars rage without mercy. Parents are worried sick that their kids will get shot on the way to school or on the way back home. Sadists who prey on children are released on bail, but there is no bail and there is no bond. Unique, never happened before. Drugged out lunatics attacked innocent victims at random. Roving mobs of thieves walk into the stores and walk out with whatever merchandise they can carry. They're left alone. Nobody tells them, don't do this. Put it back now. Homeless encampments are taking over every public park and every patch of green space in previously beautiful urban centers, and the dangerously deranged roam our streets with impunity. We're living in such a different country for one primary reason: there is no longer respect for the law, and there certainly is no order. Our country is now a cesspool of crime. We have blood, death, and suffering on a scale once unthinkable because of the Democrat Party's effort to destroy and dismantle law enforcement all throughout America. It has to stop, and it has to stop now. In Philadelphia last month, a 73-year-old man was walking along the street when he was approached by a band of 7 teenagers who attacked him for sport and beat him to death with a traffic cone. Beat him like you've never seen anyone beaten before, laughing as they bludgeoned the life from their helpless victim, cackling as they left his body on the side of the road, dead. In New York, a 35-year-old woman was stalked back to her building by a homeless career criminal. He slipped into her apartment as she opened the door, stabbed her repeatedly as she screamed for help, and left her bleeding to death in her own bathtub. Previously, that man had been arrested and released more than half a dozen times. Here in Washington, D.C., just a few weeks ago, a hardworking landscaper made the horrible mistake, had the misfortune to blow a few blades of grass into a sitting car, and he was bludgeoned, absolutely bludgeoned and shot cold blood at a point-blank range, leaving behind a grieving wife and 2 children. He was a good man. Everybody loved him. There's so many stories, I could fill a whole speech with them. I could go on with these stories for months and years. A pregnant woman murdered outside her home as she unloaded the gifts from her baby shower. A young girl struck in the head with a bullet while driving her family on her 12th birthday. A 61-year-old woman burglarized, raped, murdered, and set on fire in her home. A 70-year-old woman and a 38-year-old daughter viciously stabbed to death by a man who had been arrested for felony arson just 8 days prior and was immediately released. Just last Saturday, a man was struck by a car while crossing the street in New York, and the driver pulled over and robbed him as he lay unconscious, struggling for his life. You probably saw that. So last night, he was so badly hurt, he was unconscious, and he was robbed by the person that hit him, the car, all on tape. Some of these chilling stories are difficult to hear, but the American people need to hear them, and you have to hear them, especially the politicians in the audience that are going to give us the power to bring our country back and to make our country safe. Murder in our country is up 51%. We must never allow ourselves to grow numb to the violence that is tearing apart the fabric of our nation. It's time to have the courage to say what needs to be said and to do what needs to be done to keep America safe. We've never had a time like this. We've never had anything close to what's happening right now. We owe it to the victims, we owe it to our families, and we owe it to our country to do the right thing. In the Make America Great Again movement, we believe that every citizen of every background should be able to walk anywhere in this nation at any hour of the day without even a thought of being victimized by violent crime. If we don't have safety, we don't have freedom, we don't have a country. America first must mean safety first. We have to have safety. starting with our new majorities in Congress next year and continuing under the next Republican president. We need an all-out effort to defeat violent crime in America and strongly defeat it, and be tough and be nasty and be mean if we have to. Here's what we must do to restore public safety. First, we have to give our police back their authority, resources, power, and prestige. We have to leave our police alone. Every time they do something, they're afraid they're going to be destroyed, their pension's going to be taken away, they'll be fired, they'll be put in jail. Let them do their job. Give them back the respect that they deserve. Our great police know what to do. We have to allow them to do it. We need to return to stop and frisk policies in cities and not shy away from it. I watched as other politicians recently apologized for stop and frisk where cities were safe. And they apologized, and those cities are no longer safe. So stop and frisk. It works. Do it judiciously, but it works, and it's worked brilliantly. Take the guns away from the criminals who shouldn't be having guns. Let the people that have to have guns, that need to have guns, let them have them, but take them away from the criminals. If you're a convicted felon and you have a gun, you're off the streets and you know where you go. The mere concept of defunding the police should never again be stated or even heard. It is so ridiculous and so dangerous. Likewise, the idea of stripping them of their liability shields. Think of that. They're in trouble. Go out and hire your own lawyer. We're not going to protect you. We cannot strip them of their liability shield in any way, shape, or form. We have to stay with our police officers. You're never going to have the great officers that we've had over the years. Our police officers are heroes, performing a great public service at great personal risk. It's an unbelievably dangerous job. And by the way, more dangerous today by far, than it has ever been. Rare mistakes are made, but we cannot allow every isolated policing mistake to be turned into a national crisis and all power taken away from our police so that people are killed all over the streets of our country. The radical left's anti-police narrative is a total lie. Let's call it the big lie. Have you ever heard that expression before? The big lie. That's why next year our new majorities in Congress should vote to strengthen qualified immunity and other protections for our great police officers. They have to become our heroes. They are mine, but some people, they don't feel that way. They're going to have to feel that way if we're going to have a great country and a safe country. Our law enforcement heroes of our time, they do their duty to protect U.S. citizens and to protect everybody, whether it's our country or other countries coming in to pay their respects to the United States, which they do less and less now because they're afraid to come in. They see all the stories of safety and the lack of safety. But we must uphold our duty to protect our police officers. Second, because of the radical Democrats and because of what they've done, driving record numbers of officers to resign, retire or quit. The police work all together. The new Congress should immediately pass emergency funding to hire and retain tens of thousands more police officers all across our country. Have to go in the opposite direction. I haven't seen in a long time any bills wanting to be passed where they give the police strength. It's always where let's take more away, let's take more away, let's take immunity, let's take everything we can, take their pensions if they speak a little bit too tough. Can't do that anymore. Our country is going to hell, and it's going to hell very fast. It's a very unsafe place. We need the largest increase in the hiring of police officers in American history, and that's what this will be. And we'll get that done. I have no doubt, Kevin, we'll get that done. Steve, we'll get that done. To get more police on the streets than ever before, walking every beat and with great respect. There should be a squad car on every corner, if that's what it takes to stop the killing. Again, I don't want to make this partisan, but every city, every single city is run by Democrats. Every single city where it's in trouble, like the kind of trouble we're talking. It's run by Democrats and the crazy policies that they put forth. And they can't believe them. And certainly after all of this time with the bad results, you would say, gee, it's time to make a change. But I really believe even a majority of the Democrats would say, because they don't want to be brutalized, a majority of Democrat voters would say exactly what I'm saying is right. Third, we need a no-holds-barred national campaign to dismantle gangs and organized street crime in America. During my presidency, we sent tens of thousands of MS-13 gang members back out of our country. We'd either ideally send them out, and in some cases they were so bad and so dangerous, we put them in jail because we didn't trust the other countries to hold them. Because as you know, other countries very happily send all of their criminals now through our open border into the United States. They're emptying their jails into the United States. We're like a dumping ground. We're not going to allow that to happen. We know where these gangs operate, what streets they control. We even know their names. The police officers know their names. The problem is they're not allowed to do anything about it. And they want to. We need to get in there immediately, go into every drug den, every stash house, every hideaway, and round up the dealers and killers and the gang members and charge them with any and every crime that we find. And there are a lot of them: drug crimes, sex crimes, all sorts of crimes, vicious, vicious, horrible crimes like we've really never seen before, certainly not on a scale like this. We're a war zone. To lead this effort, a joint violent crime task force composed of the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security should be tasked with destroying these organizations, and the penalties should be very, very severe. If you look at countries throughout the world, the ones that don't have a drug problem are those that institute a very quick trial death penalty sentence for drug dealers. It sounds horrible, doesn't it? But you know what? That's the ones that don't have any problem. It doesn't take 15 years in court. It goes quickly, and you execute a drug dealer and you'll save 500 lives because they kill on average 500 people. It's terrible to say, but you take a look at every country in this world that doesn't have a problem with drugs. They have a very strong death penalty for the people that sell drugs. If we're going to stop this scourge, it's time to get brutally tough on the dealers and traffickers and narco-terrorist cartels who are stealing over 200,000 American lives a year. And that's a very low number compared to what the real number is. It's a very low. Think of it, 200,000. You don't lose that in wars. You don't lose that in wars. And yes, these drug traffickers should and must receive the death penalty. And I'll tell you, just from dealing with the heads of other countries, I said to President Xi of China, do you have a drug problem? No, no, no. Why do we ask such a question? No. He almost didn't know what I was talking about. No, no. I said, why do you think? Well, if somebody is selling drugs, they get the quick trial. Quick trial. Never forget. What is quick trial? Meaning it goes fast. And they get the death penalty. But when I asked him, I said, do you have in any way no drug problem? They do have a drug problem. You know what they do? They make drugs and send them into our country. But I had it stopped. That was a drug problem they had. But we had it stopped. Now it's bigger fentanyl. They make it, most of it, and they send it through Mexico, through the border. And we had it just about stopped. And now the border, as you know, is just a horrible situation. But you look at Singapore, you look at other countries where they have the death penalty, they have no drug problem whatsoever. And if we did that, in 1 year, even if it was not strong, because it's never going to be quite like China, I would say. What do you think, Kevin? Do you think it will ever be like? I don't think so. No matter what we do, no matter how tough we get, it won't be quite. You know what a quick trial is, right? 2 hours. That's what not 2 years, not 20 years. No, we're not going to have that. But just by the mere fact that you have that, immediately, Newt, drug dealing would go down and deaths would go down by at least 50%. 5-0. 5-0. If the radical Democrat politicians at the state, local levels refuse to protect public safety and instead turns criminals loose to prey upon the innocent, then the federal government will have no choice but to step in, not wait for the governors anymore. I was mandated, wait for the governors, but sometimes I couldn't do that. I was watching too many things happen in Minnesota, Minneapolis. What happened if we didn't send in the National Guard? They wouldn't have a city left. But you have to wait for the governors, in theory. We shouldn't be doing that anymore. If a governor wants to have vast numbers of people killed and riots and all of the problems that we have, we're not going to wait any longer. We're going to pass legislation where we can immediately go in and help those people that are under siege and they have governors that don't know what they're doing.
While the former president lauded the police, at one point calling police officers his heroes, what Trump did not mention in his first return to Washington since leaving office was the police that protected the US Capitol on January 6, 2021, or the deaths and injuries that stemmed from that attack. Trump instead told the audience our great police know what to do, but the country has to allow them to do it. Trump did call the House Select Committee investigating the attack, which has been holding high-profile hearings for weeks, the Unselect Committee of Political Hacks and Thugs. He attacked Reps. Liz Cheney of Wyoming and Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, the only two Republican on the committee by name, and said that the committee really wants to damage me so I can no longer go back to work for you. On policing, Trump specifically called for a return to stop and frisk policies in cities, argued that cities should not strip police of their liability shield in any way, shape, or form, and generally said the country should give our police back their authority, resources, power, and prestige. The speech before the America First Policy Institute's two-day summit was the first time Trump has returned to Washington since he left office. It came as Trump teases a third run for the White House in 2024, all while the congressional investigation of the January 6, 2021, insurrection triggered by his denial of the 2020 election results, plans more hearings in September. Trump passingly mentioned 2024 in the speech, nodding to his belief that the next Republican president needs to back his criminal justice plans, but only acknowledged his own ambitions when he pushed the lie that he won his bid for a second term in 2020. He also did not mention some of the Republicans flirting with running in 2024, like Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and former Vice President Mike Pence, who also appeared in Washington on Tuesday. I won a second time, did much better a second time, did a lot better, very corrupt. I always said I ran the first time and I won, and then I ran a second time, and I did much better, he said, pushing the baseless claim that the 2020 election was stolen from him. What a disgrace it was. But we may just have to do it again. We have to straighten out our country. In another reference to the lies around the 2020 election, Trump argued that the radical left's anti-police narrative is a total lie. Let's call it the big lie, he said, parroting what Democrats have called Trump's election lies. Have you ever heard that expression before? The big lie. Trump's D.C. trip also underscores his dramatic split with former Vice President Mike Pence, who Trump has publicly blamed for refusing to attempt to overturn voters' will by rejecting key states' electoral votes. Pence has pushed back, saying earlier this year that Trump is wrong in claiming that he could overturn the results. He has in recent speeches urged Republicans to drop their grievances over 2020 and offer a forward-looking platform. Pence had been scheduled to speak Monday at the Heritage Foundation in D.C., but that speech was postponed after his flight was diverted due to weather. We are a failing nation, much like his inauguration address in 2017. Trump struck a dour tone throughout the speech, painting a picture of a country riddled with crime, drugs, and homelessness. "We are a failing nation," Trump said. "The dangerously deranged roam our streets with impunity. We are living in such a different country for one primary reason. There is no longer respect for the law, and there certainly is no order. Our country is now a cesspool of crime," said Trump, at times mentioning specific high-profile crimes, many of which have been covered extensively by conservative media, where the Chinese president told him about quick trials for drug criminals in China that he estimated sentenced people in 2 hours. It sounds horrible, doesn't it? But those are the ones that don't have any problem. It doesn't take 15 years in court. It goes quickly, Trump said, before he endorsed a very strong death penalty for the people who sell drugs, something he has argued for since he was president. To combat crime, Trump argued that the next president needs to circumvent governors and deploy the National Guard and go beyond the governor, despite Republicans often arguing on behalf of states' rights. "When governors refuse to protect their people, we need to bring in what is necessary anyway," Trump said, specifically arguing the next president needs to send the National Guard to the most dangerous neighborhoods in Chicago until safety can be restored. Trump also suggested the federal government needs to build large tent cities on the outskirts of some of the nation's largest urban centers and clear out current homeless camps. He said the government should create thousands and thousands of high-quality tents at the outer reaches of the cities, and then bring in medical professionals, psychologists, and psychiatrists to work with people. Trump echoed Republican optimism that the 2022 midterms will be a standout year for the party, telling the audience that he believes the GOP is on the verge of a historic midterm election and has an incredible opportunity to win in 2022. He added, "I am here before you to begin to talk about what we must do to achieve that future when we win a triumphant victory in 2022 and when a Republican president takes back the White House in 2024, which I strongly believe will happen." He is the biggest name. Mark Lauder, the chief communications officer of the America First Policy Institute, told CNN over the weekend that they invited Trump to speak because he is still the leader of the America First movement. He is the biggest name. He's the visionary behind many of the policies that got him elected to the White House, Lauder said. And when you look at what's going on in America right now, so many people are clamoring for that kind of policy leadership back. They want cheap gas, growing paychecks, soaring stock markets, and not what we have right now. Trump allies told CNN they hoped the former president would use the speech to look forward and focus on setting a Republican agenda ahead of the midterms. As Trump has publicly teased a 2024 bid, aides and advisors have encouraged him to move on from the 2020 election and shift focus to policy that they believe could put him back in office, like the economy, school curriculum, and crime. Tuesday's speech made clear that Trump has yet to change course. In a speech that was explicitly supposed to be about crime, Trump devoted time to his 2020 election lies, Republicans that he views as disloyal, and to attack the committee investigating January 6th. One source close to Trump expressed frustration ahead of the speech that the former president seemed unable to stop obsessing over the past, concerned it would hurt his chances in a 2024 presidential campaign. This is not new for the former president. Trump has used his recent speeches to continue airing those grievances over 2020. His appearances on the campaign trail ahead of November's midterm elections have focused on endorsements of candidates who have embraced his election denialism and campaigned on efforts to undo the 2020 results and make voting more difficult for future elections. His Tuesday speech at the America First Policy Institute summit followed appearances by a host of Trump's Republican allies, including House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, Texas Sen., Ted Cruz, Wisconsin Sen., Ron Johnson, and South Carolina Sen., Lindsey Graham, as well as some of Trump's former White House and campaign aides, including Kellyanne Conway, to give voice to that agenda, to lay it out for the congressional midterms and beyond. "I think there is nobody better than the former president to be able to do that," Lauder said on CNN Sunday. "What is going to happen next is entirely up to the voters and the president and any other people who might be getting into the race," he said. "But the one thing that we know is the policies work. And so, what we are focused on is setting that stage. laying out that policy framework to get back to those winning policies. And President Trump is still one of the leaders, if not the biggest name, in that movement. Still, not all former Trump aides were enthused that he was speaking at the summit, further highlighting the discord within the Trump movement ahead of the 2024 presidential election. "Don't go, boss," Peter Navarro, who worked as an assistant under Trump, wrote in an op-ed that published Tuesday, referring to FPI as a Trojan horse that is trying to hijack the political attractiveness of Trumpism but replace Trump with an FPI anointed RINO. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, subscribe my channel. It's Mike from 24/7 TV.
And you say, what's happening to this great bastion?